My name is Todd Adams, and I live here in San Francisco. I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, but I lived most of my life in West Virginia. I actually moved out here. I'd lived in Massachusetts for about 8 months, and the boy that I was dating at the time, his family was from here, and he came back here for summer vacation, and I came with him and just never left. There are a lot more social and economic venues for me. Like, it's easier to get a job than other places, but it still has an impact because there still is like homophobia in San Francisco. So it affects what clubs I might go to. It affects how safe I feel walking late at night. Whereas like most people might say, oh, unless it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm fine. That's not true for me. After dark, it's a much more sensitive time, like for my personal safety and things like that. So that affects like my social life. And economically, it is harder, even in San Francisco, for somebody who's obviously, or who's out as LGBT to find work. It's easier than a lot of other places, but it still can be difficult, especially in different trades and things like that. He was the exact same age as me, and he had already come out to me as being gay. So he was really not surprised. He was like, well, it's about time you figured it out, because I've known for years. My mother and father had separated several years before that, and my mother was actually very, very good about it. She was very accepting, and she, I was very stressed about it. I was very much afraid that she was going to throw me out of the house and things like that. But my mother was actually a little relieved, because she had been afraid that I was so anxious and asking her, please don't be mad at me, please don't kick me out of the house. She thought I was about to tell her I was pregnant. So she was very relieved when I just told her that I was a lesbian. So, that went pretty well, and she's struggled back and forth with me coming out as trans, but she's also very... I think the jury's still out. We've discovered that a lot of things are linked to genetics that we had no idea about 10, 15, 20 years ago. We may find that it's purely genetic in the future, or we may find that it's a hybrid of lots of different things. For example, Alzheimer's as a genetic thing can be hereditary, but it's also impacted by other things. I don't know, and I don't care. I'm happy with who I am, and I don't care why I am the way I am. It's very complicated, very complex, and very personal. So my main piece of advice would be for people to take their time and know that there are resources and support out there like Lyric for them.
Okay.
They present this to their classmates. They can talk about Lyric and that sort of thing. But as a person that's been counseling people for a few years, how would you counsel young girls about their circumstance if they discover that they're lesbian, or they have some questions about it and they don't kind of know their identity just yet?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they do know their identity but aren't sure where to go and how to handle that.
Okay. Well, I would say, your high school's in San Francisco, and there are lots of resources here in San Francisco. For example, there is Lyric, but if you're just questioning and you just want somebody to talk to, there's, for example, James Gay, who is our counselor here on staff, and he meets with youth not only here at Lyric, but at their schools, and at different health centers. You really have to be gay to see him. If you're questioning, he's a great person to talk to and work those things out. Absolutely. There's also other resources such as the Dimensions Health Clinic, which is about 3 blocks away from here at Castro Mission Health Center, and they provide confidential medical care for LGBTQ questioning included. So you could talk to a doctor if you wanted to get your questions answered that way. And there's also different hotlines throughout the entire state where you can call just to talk to people.
You had indicated in your own personal experience that you came out about 17.
Mm-hmm.
Did you discover things about yourself at an earlier age, and very much earlier, or at a very early age, or was it kind of about the same time?
Yeah, it was pretty much kind of about the same time. I grew up in a much different environment than people in San Francisco do.
In which ways?
Girls to be boyish. You know, we all worked on the farms. My first job was working in the hay fields when I was 9 years old. So you didn't do that in skirts. So being boyish, being a tomboyish girl, is totally, completely acceptable. I was never challenged on that, the way people who grew up in suburbs or in an urban environment might be teased. That wasn't a part of my reality. Of course women wore pants. Of course women worked in the hayfield. Of course they did butchering. Like, how else did the family continue to support itself? So a lot of those things just never occurred to me because, of course, women were more masculine. So
interesting, because it gives us a perspective in terms of your particular background, but it makes very sense to people that aren't exposed to it per se. But I think we're very fortunate in San Francisco, given that we have very, I'd say, society and a lot of information, a lot of people, so we're constantly in touch with different communities in many different ways, whereas in other parts of the country perhaps we're not. So I think that's probably helped a little bit. There was, I'm sorry, I'm more sensitive. You can, earlier talked about what the girls could do or the student body could do in terms of their school, in terms of sharing information or trying to get people more knowledgeable about gay, lesbian, transgender. What would you recommend, or what would you like to recommend for the girls to take back to school with them, or just in
you know, there's an organization called the GSA Network, which has some really great information about how to be an ally at school, so you might want to check them out. They're geared specifically towards the school experience. But, you know, one thing that I found the most helpful when I was a teenager, and it came to things like taunts and name-calling and things like that, is when another teenager just stood up and said, "Dude, that's not cool." Here at Lyric also have workshops where we go out to the schools. Like we have one that's like homophobia in your health, that talks about like the mental health impacts of homophobia, and a workshop on oppression in general and how homophobia is a part of oppression. That we also do workshops in schools too.
And then what are some of these? Is it mostly for youth in terms of counseling? Is it more for youth just in terms of education? Is it?
Well, we provide a pretty wide array of services. So it is all for youth, all 24 and under. And we do have the counseling with James, as I mentioned before. We also have a case manager on staff, Kyle Kitson, and he'll work with youth about things like finding housing if they've been kicked out of their house, getting jobs, getting different documentation that they might need, things like that. We also have an internship program, which is open to youth which is paid and open to youth 21 and under, and that's about 10 to 15 hours of work a week, plus some different job trainings and stuff like that. And you don't have to be gay to be in the internship program. You just have to be comfortable working with gay people and things of that variety. You know, we have dances. Sometimes we have 3 a year. Sometimes we only have 2 a year. You don't have to be gay to come, but you know, there's going to be lots of gay people there, so you need to be comfortable with that. We have the Unchained Conference, which happens in the late spring, like around March through April, and it does leadership development with teenagers around issues of homophobia and economic, you know, jobs and things like that, which is open to heterosexual youth also, or youth that are just questioning.
We